Welcome to the Hope on the Hard Road podcast, where you and your family can find community, find encouragement, and find hope for the road ahead.
I'll give you an example of a traditional approach, and then we're going to reframe it. So here's what you would typically hear like in an IEP. Johnny tends to perseverate on Minecraft. They do not initiate conversations with their peers. They're socially awkward. Johnny does not make eye contact. Reframing it would be Johnny connects with his peers when given opportunities to talk about his passions of Minecraft. In class, Johnny is working on advocating for a break or when he can talk about Minecraft. Johnny does well in very small groups that have similar interests. This is where he builds connections with peers. This is his areas and levels of happiness and joy. So if we can structure environments where there's that connection, there's that safety, and there's those interest-based groups, Johnny thrives.
Before we get started today, we wanted to take a moment to let you know about some amazing events coming up.
Ladies, join us for Mom's Day Out 2026 in beautiful San Diego, California. This life-giving conference is uniquely designed for moms of children with special needs and the circle of women supporting them. It is your invitation to step away from the demands of caregiving, breathe deeply, and be reminded that you are not alone. So bring your circle of friends, your bestie, a sister, or another mom walking this road with you, and come experience everything that Mom's Day Out 2026 has to offer.
Today on the podcast, we have an amazing guest who is revolutionizing how we support neurodivergent students.
That's right. Speech therapist Chris Wenger, also known as Speech Dude, is internationally acclaimed for his work with autistic students. He is transforming therapy practices and creating spaces to support families with his neurodiversity-affirming approach.
Through his assessment tools, viral social media content, clinic work, and his new book, he's on a mission to ensure that belonging, not just fitting in, becomes the standard for how we support neurodivergent learners.
Let's listen in to today's conversation.
Well, welcome, Chris. We are so excited for you to join our podcast today.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here.
I'm really excited that you are having me as a guest. We've got some great information we're gonna cover.
For the very small percentage of people that do not know you yet, tell us a little bit about your story and how did you become Speech Dude?
Oh gosh, we're gonna start from day one. I grew up with parents that were in education. My mom was more on the administration side. My dad was a PE teacher, and he did adaptive PE for quite some time. And then when I was in high school, I grew up playing baseball. So my dad was the high school baseball coach, and he had a student that was in his class that was an autistic student. This is back in the early 90s, actually. Yeah. And he was support for the baseball team. So I was the assistant coach, and my dad was like, hey, so you really do well with working with Daniel and you're connecting with them. And he's like, I'm telling you, I'll come back to this too, but he's like, if the music thing, I know you want to pursue music, but I think you would be really good with getting into education, specifically working with kids with disabilities. And so that was like the start of it all. So I started off in special education as a teacher. And it's funny because back in the day, I had like 3 different types of curriculum. I taught English, science, and history. I was juggling the curriculum. It was tough. So those first couple years, the speech therapist would call me, this guy, Steve Felberg, and he said, hey, Chris, could I get a couple students for speech time? And I'm like, Steve, you always call with a smile. You're always happy. And the students are always antsy to get out of here to go to speech. Like, I want to see what you do. So he let me shadow him for a day. And he connected with the students so well. He would show up to the IEP meetings, and the families are always like, Steve, this guy's helping our kids out. And I'm like, I want to do that. So I went back and got a second master's degree in communicative disorders, and the rest was history. The nice thing about it is I started off when IEPs we would have to show up, and you would actually have to see the errors in the corrections because we had it printed out.
Yep.
There was no such thing as jumping on SACE and doing it that way. So I like that because it was the discussion and the collaboration with families of how can we make this the best for working with students. And then, so that really helped me get a dynamic of the entire IEP, not just from a speech lens, but from a classroom lens and academic lens. So things have changed significantly since the starting point, because now there's discussions. Now there's how can we best support? We're trying to reduce the stigma. More kids are getting out there saying, I'm autistic. I prefer not to go to the super loud rally. Is there a quieter place? Or I'm autistic, and sometimes this environment can be a little overwhelming when everyone's talking at once. Would you mind if I wear my loop ears or my noise canceling headphones? Like, we're hearing a lot more people talk about it on social media. It's just been a game changer, honestly, for everybody, for realizing and seeing autism as a culture.
Absolutely. We would so agree. I mean, we have seen it change from when our daughter was diagnosed years ago. She's 21 now, going on 22. And she was in that little window of time where, you walked out of the diagnostic center with one sheet of paper, call regional center. That's about all we had as a resource here, really, to get us started. And this environment socially of hide it, don't label, don't talk about it, and it just produces this really not productive, not life-giving environment for the family, for the individual. It's so much better with advocacy, awareness.
Where do you see the schools and the system right now often get it wrong when it comes to that and educating kids with autism?
Oh gosh, the schools and kind of in society in general tends to get it wrong by making assumptions that all kids need to fit into this certain box or to follow certain neurotypical norms. And that's the challenging part. If it's like, hey, if you could just maintain eye contact for 3 seconds every time you see somebody, if you can just have a back and forth ping pong conversation about topics you don't like, then you'll make friends, and then you'll be happy, and then you'll live happily ever after and have this harmonious life. It's like, that's where we get it wrong, is trying to push kids into being somebody they're not. We see that reflected in IEP goals and in approaches with therapy. And so fortunately, in more recent days, we're seeing a big shift on what support looks like. Still support, but it just looks different.
Yeah.
As a teacher, I love that because it's like the goal is, are they communicating? And teaching math, so forth, like that same idea. The goal is, are they thinking? Are they engaging? Meet them where they're at, build their confidence, and continue to see them develop. And now we can start, shaping them into some other things possibly, but acknowledge where they have strengths to begin with and what they bring to the table and build on that, as opposed to say, this is what learning looks like.
Looking at coming in from what creates an environment where individuals feel safe, feel connected, and things feel natural to them.
Oh, absolutely. And identity is big, right? It plays a role. How does it play a role with autistic students navigating social spaces?
Okay, yeah. So identity is huge. So shadowing what I had just mentioned about autism kind of being taboo back in the day, kids not knowing that they were different tend to internalize that they were wrong or that they were broken or that, like, why can't I just make friends like that group of people? Why is it so challenging for me? And when they didn't know the neurotype or they didn't know they were autistic, other kids labeled them other things that were far worse, right? And I shouldn't say far worse, but like negative things. Whereas once you get identity, that's kind of the foundation for everything, because then you can start to find positive connections and things that help understand, hey, it's okay to be different. And so that identity is everything. It's not like the side dish. It's like the main entree. You need that in order for everything else to fall into place, because then you can come from a level of acceptance. And it's not just autism. Like ADHD for me over the years, growing up in elementary school, I was the kid that was constantly impulsive or blurting out or never in my seat. And it never had like words or language or understood my differences or the need to move around and have sensory breaks. And so suppressing all of that catches up to you at some point. So it's a little bit better when you have identity and then you understand, hey, I'm not a broken horse. I'm a perfectly fine zebra.
That's right.
An identity, also understanding like how does your brain think, and I'm sure that's what you're capturing with the word identity. That your brain's not broken. Your brain functions differently, and working ADHD. I mean, it has incredible strengths, and sometimes the school system does not recognize what those strengths are when you just sit in a seat and be quiet.
Right. Yeah. Even on the note of like the neurology, autistic communication. So autistic communication has this like rhythmic pattern for just a different way of communicating. So understanding that helps us and helps our kids go, okay, so there's a different way I communicate, and how can I use that to help get my needs met? So for example, echolalia, delayed echolalia, immediate palalia, where you are, when somebody says a sentence and then they whisper right under their breath right after, and just knowing, hey, there's all these differences that have this similarity that helps the system stay regulated, that help process language. The more we try to suppress or correct those things, it's like playing behavior whack-a-mole. We got, all of a sudden a kid running out of a situation, or we've got, worse, like self-injurious behaviors or things like that. So I think really coming from an understanding that the neurology is different, and then how can we help support is the key.
Yeah, and how do you branch that, once you get that identity into creating like social groups and working on friendships and things like that?
I feel like bringing in special interests, creating interest-based groups, creating opportunities where people feel safe communicating the way that's natural for them. So how can we create experiences, not performance? Because when you create performance, all you're doing is suppressing who you are, and it inadvertently creates anxiety, and it inadvertently creates more stress and social isolation. And so that's what we try to veer away from. What ends up happening is the system tends to force kids into situations that aren't natural. And then the kids become more stressed because now they feel like they have to perform. The friendships that they had were all based on performance. So they were never authentic or natural in the first place. And then they don't have any friends. So working in the high school, I'll look back at IEPs that will have the same social goals for like 6 years. And the families will come in from the 8th grade to the 9th grade meeting, the transition meetings, and they'll tell me, instead of social skills, neurotypical social skills, it's more social access. That's the game changer. How can we create social access to where friendships can happen naturally, conversations can happen naturally, and our nervous systems feel like they're being supported? That's a huge one.
Yes.
Yeah, as you're talking about this, anxiety is such a big thing. Maybe you could enlighten people, educators, anybody listening to this. How do you bring that anxiety down? Because obviously it plays into not being social. Bring that anxiety down so that they can be more social and interact and feel more confident in who they are.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to anxiety, a lot of it is when our brains tend to think about what might happen, what are the differences, we get anxious. So that's why routine for a lot of our kids is so important. Once you do an activity where there's not as much predictability, the anxiety kicks in. I'll give you a good example of like going to get your haircut. Many of the students I work with absolutely hate getting a haircut, and it has nothing to do with actually getting the haircut. The brain's like, we're going to go to a place where I might have somebody different cutting my hair. I don't know if the little hairs that get cut are going to land on my face. And I've got these sensory sensitivities where I hate things landing on my nose. I don't know if a new kid's going to walk in with a balloon and accidentally pop it. I don't know if the bathroom's going to be closed. I don't know. And there's so many things that are unpredictable that now you got anxiety. So stepping back with that type of thought is, how can we create systems and groups and environments that do feel safe, and that's how you reduce anxiety. Anytime I take my children to get a haircut, or anywhere. Honestly, like some of the rides, we went to Legoland last year,
Yeah.
and there was some anxiety with my oldest that he was like, I don't know if I really want to go on the rides. I'd rather go to the souvenir shop. That happens every time it's like, oh man, this is everywhere we go. But part of it was, let's look at the rides. Let's look at what it looks like. And so we got on YouTube and we actually did the journey of people recording the ride going through it. And it's like, all right, it looks like we could wear some noise canceling headphones. It looks like this one's quiet and soft and not all rickety. It looks like the smells are going to be minimal because there's no water, there's no dark tunnels, there's nothing jumping at you. And then we're giving an idea in advance of what that situation is going to look like. So there's predictability.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's really a helpful thing. So I just think it's just shifting our lens on how we can help meet those needs. And again, like sensory thing is always a big one. Like I'm always looking at what could potentially be creating anxiety. Is there something that might be really loud? A lot of people around that are going to be talking at once, like those 4th of July parades.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
When you talk about self-advocacy, because I know you're so strong on that, we love it, and autonomy, what is PDA? That's like one of these things that keeps coming up. And we have not learned enough about it. I mean, it's an amazing thing to know more how the brain is functioning in this area. And what methods are you finding for helping as you work with children with PDA?
Yeah. So, gosh, there's not a ton of current research out right now because I don't want to say it's relatively new, but they're continuously learning a lot more
Yeah.
about PD as a separate neurotype. But right now, as it currently stands, the general consensus is that it's a sub-profile of autism. So the brain has the amygdala, the alarm system, the limbic system, that's like an alarm system that's always on high alert. And if it feels like there's a loss of control or the brain doesn't feel safe, and it could be something that seems to other people as something simple, the alarm goes off, right? It goes boom, and it goes into survival mode. And it could be something as simple as, hey, we're going to head to Target. And then the brother says, I want to go too. And the brain doesn't feel like it has that safety or control. And it's like, you get this big outward flight or fight or aggression or yelling, or it's like, whoa, where did that come from? It was like a huge response, right? The thing about PDA specific to it is that when the alarm system goes off, when it goes into this big either meltdown, like this, the brain's protecting itself, it shuts off other parts of basic needs for the body because the brain and the body connect. So what ends up happening is it's like, hey, I need you to go to like when their brain feels like it's losing autonomy on something, it can be even simple. Like, I need you to go get water from the kitchen. The brain's like, like this big explosion, but it shuts down the homeostasis, the movements between the body and the brain for basic needs. So it impacts eating, it impacts sleeping, it impacts some like using the restroom, things like that. It's like a pretty significant thing. Most of the kids, I don't want to say all, but in my experience over the past 22 years in the schools is many of these kids, here's the pattern, multiple IEP meetings over and over. And then like the first IEP meeting is like, we don't understand this child has some skills, but they're not accessing those skills, constantly running out of the class or constantly knocking over the tables, things like that. And so what ends up happening is that, and there's no shame or blame here, but this approach usually doesn't work, is coming in with a big reward system or like a behavioral approach. Mm-hmm. And the behavioral approach is, if you do the thing, then we'll give you a token or a sticker or something. But the brain's like, I'm already dysregulated. So all it does is it starts to bottle up like a volcano. Right. And then you have bigger things that happen. Other kids get hit, and it's not like like the kid could do well and sit there and write down what the teacher wanted them to do, they would. If the kid can sit along and read with the class during that time, they would. Nobody wants to just like out of nowhere go and hit somebody. There's a lot of shame that follows up with it. So the brain, because it keeps bottling up all of this pressure to do things because it's not feeling like it's in control. Another IEP meeting happens and another one to where then we see a change in placement of how can we meet the kids' needs because this full schedule is not working. And sometimes that might be a hybrid model. Maybe and I work with high school, so it's a lot different for elementary, but we see sometimes like it can get so significant because it impacts the basic needs for using the restroom and sleep and eating that everybody's situation is different on this, but sometimes we'll see that the kid can't make it to school. So then we'll see either like a homeschool model or an unschool model or things like that. So I see that pattern. That's kind of like my big like, aha, I know what this is. Now, with that being said, what I also see on IEPs and on psych reports is a pattern where the child will have a diagnosis ADHD for impulsive or running out of the class or blurting out or something. And then they'll get a diagnosis of, I don't agree with this diagnosis, by the way, but I'm just going to share, but it's ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. But it's really not them being oppositionally defiant, like on purpose. And that's what the language in that label kind of says is purposely trying to piss off the teacher or purposely trying to make you mad. But it's like, no, the brain is trying to stay safe. So that's why the child's running away from the situation. It's like fight or flight, right? But those are the kind of labels I see in the report. So pathological demand avoidance, which many people and myself included prefer using like a pervasive drive for autonomy. Even I don't know if that fully gets it. It's more of like it's like a protection. It's like a safety thing for the brain. So the IEP has to fully come from accommodations and supporting autonomy. So giving the child some choices and flexibility and creating a safety net. So a lot of times it will be like the accommodations will be sensory breaks, movement breaks. Student will allow reduction of having to scribe. Maybe they'll have the teacher print the notes, but it has to come from the IEP has to fully support safety and autonomy. That's huge.
As I'm listening to this, both as a parent and as a teacher, I'm like, man, this education of not only do we have to educate parents, but educate the school system, because what you came up, I was thinking emotionally disturbed. You said ODD, and yet that is a mislabel. It's a misnomer of what's actually going on. It's their brain is hijacked basically by anxiety and the stress and lack of control, and then it's reacting. It's not thoughtful. It's not.
Right. It's all subconscious. And so the language and the way that we view working with these types of students can really make or break the outcomes. Because if you can come in and say, look, I see that this student comes to school and immediately is hitting somebody, then the lens is what type of accumulation in the nervous system happened to where the student didn't feel safe, to where they had to feel like they had to gain control in that moment, right? That's a different lens than saying, let's create an IEP with student will stop hitting their peers 5 times a day, because those types of things don't work. And that's why we see behavior intervention plans going on for years and years. It's like, we got to shift the lens and the way that we approach how to best support the students. How do we create the safety net? And a lot of this too has to deal with, on the autistic neurology, creating an environment where the sensory needs are being met. Right. And it's like automatically in the school district that I work in, like every class has fluorescent bright lights. I'm like, why do these have to be put into the building codes or whatnot? Like this stuff. So it's like creating dimmer situations, less stress with everyone talking at once. That's why substitute teachers, when our kids have subs, the suck, because the sub doesn't really control all of the noise in the class. And it can become so dysregulating that the child bottles it up in school. Yeah. And they get home and boom, parents like, I don't understand this. My child's like an angel at school, and they come home and they're the Tasmanian devil. They just tore up the whole kitchen and punched and kicked their brother. And wow. But it's just that what happens is it's like suppressing all of that at school. We'll bottle up, volcano at home.
You mentioned that it's so often that happens with me, and we realize, oh, she had a great day at school, and then it is here, oh, she had a bad day at school, and now she's calm at home because she actually let it out or something.
Yeah.
Exactly. The idea that you're like, really, she has all this self-control because she wants to access her world.
Yeah.
And then it's by the end of the day, it's shot. On a practical level, like what kind of goals can you arm parents with as you go into an IEP saying, this is a real challenging diagnosis that you're discussing, but what kind of practical goals, generic potentially, can we put in place that are going to support these kids and see progress as opposed to that repetitive behavioral plan?
I think that we shift back to the services page of the IEP. And the services page is where the accommodations and modifications are. And the accommodations are really important because honestly, that's going to drive what the teachers see and how they can structure the environment. So I'll give you some examples of things that might be helpful. Sometimes trying to go at the same pace on taking notes in class can be stressful, maybe from processing, from looking at the visual and then getting the pen to paper. So maybe having an option of getting the notes printed in advance, the option of noise canceling headphones if the student has sound sensitivities or, there's a class with a lot of noises going on, having the option to take and demonstrate mastery with a variety of options. So like if a student is reading a novel in class and the teacher wants it turned in a certain way, they have like an option of showing how they learned it. Taking a sensory or movement break when feeling dysregulated or feeling some anxiety when the heart starts beating. The goal might be student when feeling dysregulated or when having challenges with executive functioning will advocate for, and then what are those accommodations, right? We'll advocate for support with sensory needs. We'll advocate for communication support. We'll advocate for executive organizational support. And so what that does is it puts the control in the student's hands. They're learning a skill in school as well as outside of school because these types of approaches it can help everywhere. So when the students are outside of school, they're working on advocating for what it is they need in a restaurant. They might be learning tools such as reaching out through Yelp or through the dentist app that they have. Like, I am sensitive to some bright lights. Is it cool if I wear some of my sunglasses and my AirPods? Can I wear a weighted blanket when I come? Can I come in on this day? These seem to be better. Like all of this is helping meet the needs. So that's kind of one broad scope goal. The self-advocacy piece can come from learning to set boundaries of things that don't work for them or to learn to ask for consent. So some of my students with higher support needs I've had in the past like to hug people. And the thing about it is sometimes I had a situation where the student, he's just like such a kind young man, but he hugged the security guard from behind and the security guard didn't know it was him. Now you've got a life-threatening situation if you're in public and you're hugging somebody who has a weapon on them. It's like, okay, so how do we build this into the school setting to help the student, which is student will learn to ask if it's okay for a hug first, right? So we're asking for consent. And this is really things that will help, in all environments.
You know what I like about this? This is all come in full circle. Start with what their education, what their communication is at the table, bring them, continue to build their confidence because they're going to need that to advocate, and just seeing that whole trajectory on what they're going to need for long-term in life is a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like part of the assessment process too. And part of the importance of reaching out for like someone like me who's in the schools to get information from the families, like what's going on at home. How do they seek help when they're struggling on something? When your child's dysregulated, what are some ways that tend to best help support them to get back to safety or feeling calm when they need help for something. What does that look like? So that gives me and my assessment the guidance of what types of goals I can create. And that way we're building trust and solid communication too. Back in 1953, the DSM was created, the diagnostic manual, and it's always been, even till current day, deficit focused. Like, what can't the child do? You can't initiate a conversation. You can't make eye contact. The student has odd or weird behavior, or they've flapped their hands. It's like all of the same questionnaires that get sent to families. It's built on deficit-based language. So when the families have to fill these things out, it's just disheartening. It's like, why don't we come from an approach of truly understanding the neurology, and then what are the things that we can do to build an IEP and goals to best help support these kids? And so that's where my assessment idea came from, was I need information in real time from all stakeholders on coming in with a strength-based approach, not a deficit-based approach. And so, I have a therapist form that will come in to help students who might be Gestalt language processors. And how does communication and language look to the therapist, and how can we build from there? We come from asking the families about emotional regulation. What are the things that the child's interested in? What are the types of things you enjoy doing as a family together? When you're out in public, what types of things helps your child problem solve? Do they seek help on their own? And what about when they become dysregulated? And so I'm getting information from the family in that way. From the teachers, the forms that I've created ask the teachers what types of accommodations seem to be working. The reports, when you show up with the families and you're able to describe the child truly for who they are, everybody wins, because the parent-child relationship is solid because they're hearing language that's true to their child. I'll give you an example of a traditional approach, and then we're going to reframe it. So here's what you would typically hear, like in an IEP. I'm just telling you based on 3,000 IEPs I've been in.
We've probably heard them.
Reports I've had to see, but it's like you'll see things that will say, Johnny tends to perseverate on Minecraft. They do not initiate conversations with their peers. They're socially awkward. Johnny does not make eye contact. Reframing it would be, Johnny connects with his peers when given opportunities to talk about his passions of Minecraft. In class, Johnny is working on advocating for a break, or when he can talk about Minecraft. Johnny does well in very small groups that have similar interests. This is where he builds connections with peers. This is his areas and levels of happiness and joy. So if we can structure environments where there's that connection, there's that safety, and there's those interest-based groups, Johnny thrives. Right there, we just changed everything in Johnny's life solely on how we received our data for the assessments. And so that will help guide the goals, right?
Yep.
And the IEP accommodations, interest-based groups, accommodations in class for getting some time to talk about Minecraft in a way that works for everyone, or to take a break, connecting with peers that are similar, that are authentic and natural, where conversations happen organically. So we're not forcing Johnny to perform and have these relationships or friendships that are based on performance or faking who he is. So yeah, it could really be the game changer. It's night and day for the kids based on the language we use.
I love that. And, there's so much now about the dangers of masking, or the consequences of masking, right?
Right.
So I think that highlights that, and the fact of, how we can flip that script, how we can change that.
Right. And you know what? I hear this question, or sometimes people will ask me on social media, like, but doesn't everybody mask? And it's like, sure, I understand that. Like, if I were to get an ugly sweater from my grandma for the holiday season, I might, more than likely 100%, I'd be like, thank you so much, grandma. I really like this, right? I have autonomy and I have choice and I'm protecting grandma's feelings. But that's not what autistic masking is. Autistic masking is hiding your core identity, which ends up suppressing who you are. And that ends up creating more stress and more anxiety, which leads to burnout eventually. So that's why sometimes we'll see students will get to a point where they're like, I can't go to school, I can't move, I can't eat, I'm in burnout. And so we try to help stay within that window of tolerance and create situations where our students aren't getting maxed out on the nervous system. When you're constantly taught who you are is not okay, that's where the heavy masking comes in. And that's actually where you see suppression of your identity, and the anxiety and stress leads to a misbalance in the system where it creates health complications. So that could lead to later onset autoimmune challenges, mental health challenges, all of those. That's why it's so important.
Absolutely. So, Chris, tell us what's the latest for you. We know you have this amazing neuro affirming assessment kit. We just kind of touched on that, but you also have a new book that has come out. So, we would love to hear the latest.
Okay, I got two things for you that will be really helpful for the listeners. The first thing is, yes, I have a children's book, but it's actually for school age students. So I work with high school students. I wrote it in a way where the language is great for all ages. It's essentially about a zebra who's in the savannah land where there's a lot of horses, and the zebra, his name's Stripey. He's like, I'm going to have to be like the horses. I'm going to have to blend in. So he ends up trying to rub off his stripes. He tries to run like the horses, and none of it's working. And he ends up rolling off this cliff and being in a dark place. So it's a metaphor for trying to be someone he's not, put him in this place of loneliness and sadness. He has a guidance by this owl named Hootie, who's this wise owl that says, let me pull you out of here and show you what else is going on. And what Stripey realizes is he's not the only one. There's other animals that are also trying to hide their identity, and it's not working for them. So Stripey ends up influencing the rest of Savannah Land to say, look, identifying who you are, acceptance will bring strength and peace, and it just changes the outlook of all of Savannah Land for the better. And the cool thing is that it has an activity book. So it's not just a children's book that you read front to back. It has pre and post questions to guide deep conversations with students. It's all coming from neuro affirming language. So that way it sets up either the caregiver or the therapist or the teacher of what types of questions and discussions can I have before reading this, and then the follow-up. And then there's some like coloring and doodling activities. There's a big blank Stripey where they have to color in their own zebra of what it might look like, and a lot of fun, and then some fun tie-in games. And you can find that at speechdude.com/zebra. And that'll give you a lot more details. There's a video that'll show it to you. It's on Amazon too. But yeah, that's it. The second thing that I'm in the process of building out and continuously working on is a website. It's a website for the things that we've discussed during this episode, which is, what if families are looking for people like me? They want a speech therapist that knows the language, that knows neurodiversity affirming approaches. They want an occupational therapist that says, I'm coming in from a strengths-based approach so we can structure an environment that's child-led, that's play-based, that has the right information for families. There's coaches for parents where the parents can say, look, I'm stuck on this IEP. It just doesn't seem to be what it is. Who can I call for 1 hour? And it's a directory that's global. Awesome. And they can search by the provider type, they can search by location, and they can search by training. So if they want to find somebody who's trained in PDA, like we talked about, they can type that in the search bar and their zip code, and they'll see who's in their local area. It currently has 500 providers. It's at neuroaffirm.com. So neuroaffirm.com, hopefully it'll be on the rise. I'm going to be pushing that more in the future. But that's really what I want families around the globe to have is, where can we find the right provider for my child? That'll make or break everything, honestly. All it takes is one person that has the right language to shift everybody else. I've done it for many years where you will get a whole IEP team of like, the professional providers that are using language that you're like, I'm not going to correct them, but I'm going to use the language that works. And all of a sudden, they start using that language and everybody's on board. It's like jumping on a waterbed. One person does it and everybody else feels it. I'm that dude jumping on the waterbed.
No, it has a ripple effect.
It really does, honestly.
That's great stuff. It's been so enjoyable to listen to you, hear the perspectives, positive perspective, to look at these individuals and move forward. One of the things we always love to do is ask our guests, what is one thing that you'd like our listeners to hear that brings hope for the road ahead?
The world is changing, and seeing and accepting and bringing down stigma. I think that the road ahead is continuously shifting that lens into more of a neuro affirming approach is the biggest game changer for all families. And I just think that these past couple of years too, with social media being such a prominent area of families getting access to information, is key. So that's it. I think that's the biggest one, shifting the lens.
Love it. Oh gosh, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. This was such a pleasure. It was so fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great conversation. Hopefully we got some information out there for the listeners.
Check out the show notes to find resources and contact information for today's episode.
Yeah, and if you like the podcast, please share it with others and be sure to follow us so you won't miss an episode.
We love to hear from our listeners, so leave us a comment or rating and connect with us on social media or on our website at hopeonthehardroad.org.